And then you find out his other motive, which is to turn Jesse basically into a breeder. Okay, so this episode opens with a recap of B is kind of going over everything in her head from, you know, the recent fight that she had with Jesse to obviously the situation she had with Leo, and eventually she decides that she's going to go to 21B Baker Street and confront Watson. And that's what she does. Now, on her way there, you can see there's a lot of chaos and stuff going on in the streets. People are running. People are packing their stuff. The horses are going crazy because if you remember in the last episode, the shooting rang out. Everybody ran to see what was going on. It's just, this one is just chaos in the city. So she makes it to the house, and she's now talking to Watson. And he starts, you know, she basically asked him why he did it. And he went into kind of the backstory of about him and Sherlock, and how Sherlock's like he was the one that saw greatness in Sherlock. Sherlock was this unknown person, and you know, he was the one who, you know, encouraged him. He was the one that saw, you know, the person that we see, that, you know, that people see as Sherlock.
When I first met Sherlock, he was unknown. I was the one who saw greatness in him.
And it was through, you know, he knew Sherlock's weaknesses, he knew his strengths, and so he felt like he knew his faults. He knew him, and so he knew how to kind of work with him and keep him focused and things of that nature.
His flaws and foibles were many, but they were my domain. I understood how to keep him focused.
And he kind of resented the fact that, you know, not kind of, he did. He resented the fact that Sherlock ended up taking all of the credit. And he even made mention that, you know, basically the person that we know as Sherlock and the success that he has had was based on two people, him and Sherlock and Watson. And Watson always felt like he was kind of casted aside, even though he did a lot of the work.
Sherlock Holmes is not the work of one man, but of two. His successes were my own.
And then she asked the question, like, why did he save Sherlock instead of her mother?
Why did you save him and not my mom at the Rip?
And he was like, you know, basically he was jealous. He was jealous of the relationship between Sherlock and Alice, and he felt like he was the person that knew Sherlock best. And when she came on, he felt like, you know, and it was obvious that it was a different relationship. He felt like Alice was able to reach Sherlock in a way that he never could. And, you know, he resented her being there and interfering with their life. And he made mention that she was able to soothe him in a way that he couldn't.
Your mother didn't just manage his flaws and foibles. She soothed something deep within him.
And B was like, you know, she, you know, wasn't there, shouldn't have been there to soothe him. He should have been there to soothe her.
My mum shouldn't have been soothing Sherlock. He should have been soothing her.
And, you know, she resented the fact that he's talking about all this greatness, that he's great and Sherlock's great. And she was like, it's amazing how men are able to see greatness, but when it comes to women, somehow they don't see that.
How is it that men can be so obsessed by it, yet never see when a woman has it?
And even, you know, Watson had to admit that he understands, understood what, you know, she was saying. And, you know, in hindsight, you know, it's true. And, you know, B wasn't really satisfied with the response that she got. And she ended up asking him again, like, why. She asked him a couple of times. And then he eventually had to admit that he loved Sherlock, that he's always loved him.
Inseparable.
Tell me why you didn't save my mom.
Because I love him.
And they traded a few more words. And this is when Sherlock arrived with Jesse.
John, where the hell are you?
And she was clearly unconscious, and now he's explaining like what's going on. He's saying that somebody at the dock, when he saw carrying Jesse, gave Jesse to him and talked about the linen man. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, he never explained why he was down at the dock. He just happened to be down at the dock. I mean, I get, you know, the crash happened. He never talked about who this dock worker is. He never talked about why this dock worker would hand Jesse to him. Like, what did he know that Jesse, he didn't really go into all that. And then he mentioned it was an American guy, the linen man. I'm like, well, how would he know that? I mean, obviously by his accent, if he heard him speak, he can tell that he was American, but how would he know to refer to him as the linen man? Whatever that is. But anywho, they end up talking about like why he's there, trying to figure out why he's there, and Sherlock is like, well, maybe he's an obsessionist like Alice and like Jesse is, and he's trying to get access to all of this power, and John ends up asking, well, who is he? And actually no, before Sherlock said something about him being an obsessionist, I believe, John asked, well, who is he? And then Sherlock was like, well, why don't you tell me?
Who is he, Sherlock?
I don't know, John. I was hoping you could tell me.
Because all the time, Sherlock has felt like Watson has been keeping things from him. And surprise, surprise, B actually came to his defense, like Watson didn't do anything this time. He doesn't know anything about what's going on.
It's not him, Sherlock. What's happening now has got nothing to do with the doctor.
And that's when Sherlock stated that he's, might be an obsessionist, and like Allison and B, and he's there to get this power. And John was like, him having access to this power would basically make him like a god.
An obsessionist like him, he would have the skill to harness all of his power. He will become a god in this world.
And now they're trying to figure out, like, how are they going to find him? How are they going to get to this rip before him? So while they're, kind of muddling things over, figure out how they're going to do, figure these things out, it flashed to Jesse. Jesse's still being in the cave. And he is basically torturing her, telling her how, the plague doctors are after her and that there's no way out.
You think you've lost them, but the plague doctors can smell you, Jessica.
And he made mention of monsters and how how he, wanted her to help him find the rip, but she couldn't because she was weak. And he talked about, that's when he started talking about monsters and how, once he has access to the power from the rip, then he'll be able to stop the monsters. And then he started showing her flashes of the future, the wars, Hitler, all of the stuff that's going to, that's going to happen, that he is claiming that with this power he's going to be able to prevent from happening. So we go back to the present where they're still trying to figure out how they're going to find this man and find the rep. A constable walks in and basically says they need them down at Scotland Yard. Something has just happened. So they flash to the palace. Leo is once again in his room looking sad and pitiful and just clearly he doesn't want to be there. He's talking to his sister Louise, and she was basically saying that, like, what did you think that was going to happen? That she was going to be allowed to live on the street or bring some random girl home? Like, what exactly did you think was going to happen? And he basically said that he wanted to be normal, that, he's tired of being sat up in that room, and he wants to have, he wanted to know what it would be like to have friends.
Maybe all those years I was sitting in this godforsaken room dreaming of how it'd feel to have friends. So
Daimler eventually walks in, and, Louise, she made her exit, and he, spoke to her. Daimler spoke to her, and she kind of cut her eyes at him because that's her brother, and she loved her brother, and she feel like Daimler is doing the absolute most, which he is. And so he came to, give him an update that some family is going to be in town. They're going to stop by. And then he said something about Her Majesty, has been informed that Eleanor is looking for a suitor.
Her Majesty heard the news that Helena's in search of a suitor.
And so you saw Leo's face change. He got out of bed, and he's still injured, nursing his injuries. And he was like, well, really, how would she find out about that? And he said, I really don't know, like this smug look on his face.
And how did she learn that news?
I don't know, Your Highness.
And I'm just confused and befuddled. He's the future king. So it's like, why are you antagonizing him? Like, he would be the last person that you would want to be your enemy, I would think. But Daimler kind of walked off with this little smug look on his face, like he's won something. I'm not exactly sure. So what is the game with Daimler? I'm trying, he has this air like he has more power than the prince. So I'm like, where what's going on with that? Are we gonna find out about that? I don't know. I guess we have to keep watching. So Spike ends up going to see Billy, and of course we know Billy is still in jail for killing Vic, which was self-defense. He antagonized Billy into fighting him. Billy ends up fighting him, and the guy ends up dying. So Billy is basically telling him that, you know, the next day he goes to, I guess, the court where they're going to set a trial date, and Billy is being realistic. He's basically saying that I don't think that imprisonment is what they have in mind. He thinks that they're going to go for the death penalty. And of course, Spike is like, wait a minute, you were just defending yourself. And he's like, well, he was one of them. He's one of them. He was the master of the workhouse, which had some, had some status. And they're going to feel like he killed one of their own, even though they antagonized him and instigated the fight. And so he's not holding out any hope that he's going to ever really be granted a fair trial. And so Spike is like, well, you know what? I'm working on something on, basically how to get you out of here. And he ends up saying, Spike, what are you talking about? Are you going to get me out of this cell? You're thinking like a child. And of course, Spike got offended. He got upset. And that's when he started talking about, you're the muscle. You're talking about Billy, you're the muscle. Leo's the brain. Jesse's the soul. And B's the heart. And, what am I? And he's like, I'm the skeleton. I'm the person that holds everything together, and yet I never get any credit for it.
I'm the freaking skeleton. The most important part, the one that keeps us all together. I don't ever get any recognition for it. And
so, of course, Billy apologized to him, and they, exchanged a few more words, and Spike ended up leaving. So they get to Scotland Yard, and you already see like a dead body at the top of the stairs, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. The man is trying to explain to them that somebody, they came in and they made it down to records, and they only wanted records of the cases that Sherlock and Watson had worked on. And then he explained that how this guy had touched the records clerk, and he ended up bashing his own brains out, which was the body they saw at the top of the stairs.
He walked straight up to the reception clerk, touched his arm. He bashed his own brains out against the wall.
My God.
And, of course, they're expecting Sherlock to do his powers of deduction to dazzle them, by the clues and everything that's going on in the room. And, he's kind of stuttering and stammering. And eventually, Watson ends up saying, well, you don't really have to do it, because he's trying to cover for him. He doesn't want him to lose his image to be tainted. And he know that Sherlock is not on top of his game, so he's trying to you don't really have to do this right now. And Sherlock is like, well, no. So now it's kind of like almost a little fight going back between them. B ends up stepping in and saying that her sister said something about he's looking for monsters and something about rips in the brain. And
Jesse said the location of the rip was in their minds. There's a handful of monsters, but finding one in a city of 5 million would be like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Which I thought, I'm like, when did she say that? Correct me if I'm wrong. When did Jesse end up? I don't remember that conversation, and how they end up going back to a person that they know is still alive, that has powers, and that is Arthur, which was the guy from the first episode that was stealing the babies because he couldn't deal with the fact that his baby had died. He's locked up in the asylum, and so now they're trying to get to him before the Linden Man does. So they briefly flash to Jesse. Jesse's still having these flashes of stuff that's going on, and then you find out his other motive, which is to turn Jesse basically into a breeder. He's saying that, his goal is that because his son is an Ipsissimus too, and he wanted him and Jesse to get together and make all these Ipsissimus babies to create this dynasty of Ipsissimi, whatever he's saying. And, basically that's his plan, to create this dynasty using, Jesse.
I have a son. He's an Ipsissimus also. You will have a family with him.
Okay, so in the next scene, they reach the asylum and they're able to go in. They sent B in because he's familiar with her. Obviously, they're the ones that found him, figured it out. And so they sent B in to talk to him with this syringe. And so she explained to him that this bad man is going to be coming to talk to you. He's trying to find out where the rip is. And of course, Arthur has no idea. What are you talking about? Who is this man? What is this rip?
He's going to try and get into your head and find out what the rip is.
I don't know what that is. A rip.
And she gave him the syringe and basically said that when he comes in after he, reads your mind, we want you to inject him with whatever whatever's in the syringe, I guess, to incapacitate him. I don't know.
Once he's been in your head, we want you to put him under. Okay, so at this point, Spike, his plan was to get to Leo. So at this point, they all, with the exception of Billy because he was locked up, everybody else know about Leo, that he's actually a prince and that his mother is the queen, And he actually told Billy, when he went to see Billy, he did tell him about what was going on. And of course, Billy felt like, okay, I knew he was, something was off about him, but I didn't know it was that. But anyway, so now he's trying to get into the palace so he can get to Leo. So he ends up jumping the wall. No sooner than he jumped the wall, the guards are already on him, and they take him into the palace. So Spike is now in the palace, and he's actually Leo's sister, is in one of the sitting rooms, and of course Spike can't miss an opportunity to flirt with her. So he's talking about how he could take her around London, and she's like sitting there looking at him, and she thinks he's charming, but I'm like, you don't have a chance in hell. But anywho, so eventually Leo walks in, and of course he's surprised to see Spike. And Spike made mention of, he basically made mention of him not being honest about who he really was. And eventually, Louise left and they started talking. And Spike basically tells him that, it's crazy out in these streets, and if we don't find out where this rip is, if we don't figure something out, then your mother is not going to have basically subjects to, she won't be queen of anything.
If we don't find this rip, and pronto, that dear old mum of yours, mate, she won't have a kingdom to rule over.
And so Leo ends up saying that, for many years I was standing here looking out this window and, seeing, knowing the evils that happen in this city. And, despite the fact that this city has been so terrible to you and your friends, why do you want to, I'm surprised that you'd even care that it, what happens to it. And so that kind of set Spike back. Like he said, so what, so they're just my friends. So what, we're not friends, we're not mates anymore. And Leo is trying to play it off like, I just did that basically for some excitement and some entertainment. And of course, Spike is not buying it. And so Leo was saying, I knew that the only way that I could, kind of get in with you guys is to pretend to be something else. I knew you would never accept me if you knew who I really was. And
I had to pretend to be someone else to hang around with you all. You'd never have liked me if you knew who I was.
Spike was like, okay, so tell me, I want you to tell me to my face that we're not friends, and that you don't, that you're not friends with Jesse, and that you don't care about, B. And that's what broke him. He was like, I can't say that about B. I can't say that.
And that B means nothing to you.
I can't say that. I can't.
So what's your problem then?
He kept, saying that I don't know where I fit in. I don't fit in there. I don't fit into here. And, it's frustrating, not knowing where you belong. And Spike ends up telling him that you belong with us.
That's why you belong to us.
So we flash to the asylum. They're all kind of sitting around waiting for the Linen Man to show up. Eventually they realize he has, because one of the guards basically jumped to his death. He committed suicide. And so they realized that he was there. So eventually he made his appearance and made his way downstairs. And, the whole time they're kind of keeping an eye, seeing, what's going on. He makes it to Arthur's cell. And Arthur ends up asking him, are you here to kill me? And he was basically like, not if you give me what I want. So he ends up touching Arthur and going into his memory. And he's going back to the memory where he got his powers. And so he ends up touching something on the table, and it's almost like he was absorbing the powers, or I don't know if he was kind of like getting a feel for trying to track of, I don't know if he was absorbing the powers or trying to read like where they could possibly be coming from. I'm not really sure. And so, he eventually came out of the memory, and as he was about to leave, he turned to Arthur and was like, I think you're hiding something from me. And what he was hiding was he had the syringe hidden under the mattress, that he was supposed to stick him with.
And so I guess things got quiet. They went in to investigate. This is Sherlock Watson, and it was another police officer and B, and you saw Arthur standing in the doorway, and he had already did whatever mojo he worked on him. And so next thing you know, Arthur's coming at them asking about his baby.
Need my baby back, or I'll rip your head off.
So while Watson, Sherlock, and the other police officers trying to get him under control, you could see the Lindemann laying on Arthur's bed. So B thought that he had jabbed him with the syringe. So she went in, but she didn't, and he ends up grabbing B and ends up... she wasn't like in a slumber, so she wasn't unconscious, but she was hearing her mother's voice, hearing this song that was just, in a sense, distracting her, right?
Sweet dreams.
And so he was able to slip out. Sherlock comes in. He sees that he's done something to B. So now Sherlock and Watson are now after the Lindemann. He's trying to find his way out. He somehow got a skeleton key, I guess, from the security guard that committed suicide. So he ends up making it to a door that the skeleton key doesn't work on. Sherlock ends up catching up to him first. And he basically told him that if he doesn't undo what he's done to Jesse and B, that he was going to blow his brains out.
First you let Jessie out of wherever you've trapped her, and then you tell me where the rip is, and if you don't, I mean wiping your brains off that door there.
So at this point, the officer, I keep saying guard, Watson and B, they arrived, but they're on the other side, but they could see both of them. And the Lindemann was like, well, talking about how we could be friends, and end up telling him to how they could it's barely audible from where Watson and them are standing. And so he ends up saying something to Sherlock, and Sherlock ends up, I guess, getting into this trance, and he ends up opening the door and letting him out. And of course, from their point of view, they're trying to figure out, like, what the hell is going on? Why is he going? Why is he letting him out? Why is he going with him? At this point, they have no idea what the hell's going on. So Watson and B are back at the house, and of course she's, sitting with Jesse, and they're still trying to figure out, like, why did he go with him? What is going on? And as in the middle of B's sentence, she was having a conversation with Watson. He kind of see her mind kind of trail off, and she's hearing her mother's voice again and singing. And of course, Watson is asking her, like, "Are you okay?"
You alright?
And so she excused herself, and she went to the restroom. And while she was there, she had a flash of the last time she saw her mother, and it was when her mother went to the church, and she asked the nun to look after B and Jesse, and it was Anna, the nun that she was talking to when she went to visit her mother's grave.
I just need you to look after them, okay?
And so that was an emotional scene. So what brought her out of it is that she heard Spike calling to see, asking if anybody was there. So when she went out, she saw Billy.
Look who I found.
And of course, she, hugged Spike. And then of course she's kind of confused, like, well, what is going on? How did Billy get out? And then she turned, and Leo was there, and basically saying that he had pulled some strings to get Billy out. And of course, she thanked him, and he was like, it's the least I could do. And so then they asked about Jesse, who they know is still unconscious. And so they're all going over, and they're encouraging her, and begging her to come back and to not give up. And at this point, she's basically buried under all this dirt. And so she kind of wakes up. This is in her, in the cave, and she's digging herself out. And, she starts having these flashes of the first episode we saw when she was in the cave, and all of these beams of light was kind of going around her, and the picture was a lot clearer. And so what she saw were these workers who were wearing the hats with the lights on them, and they blew the cave, which is what she experienced when she was standing there, and like this gust of dust and wind and debris came flying at her as they blew the cave. And then, she had another flash of, okay, when they went into the cave after blowing it, that's when they saw the bones and that. And so they realized it was a plague cave. And that's the flashes of light were them actually leaving. It was the lights on their helmets they were actually leaving.
Oh, it's a plague pit. Right, everybody.
And so, as she proceeded through the cave, she came up to what they were actually working on. It was, I guess, an extension or a new line called the Inner Circle. Inner Circle Station or something to that effect. And so, that's when, of course, remember when they pulled her down to the ground, they kept saying circle, circle, circle. So now it's making sense. That's where the rip is. Okay, so after she figured out where the rip is, she woke up. So, of course, they're all ecstatic. They're all happy. And unfortunately, the Linen Man and Sherlock have already figured this out. They've made their way there. And they have found the rip. And that's how this episode ends. So, I'm going to end this here.